What's going on, U.S. history kids? Mr. Tomei here. It is Monday, November 2nd. You guys had a whole day off of school. We had a full day of meetings. That's always fun. So hopefully you've enjoyed your day off, but when you'll be watching this, it'll be later in the week. Coming at you the night before the election. Um, a lot that can be said about that, but I'll have a little thing posted on the classroom for you guys. In spirit, standing rocking with y'all. Um, but here's where we're going next. We just finished our second unit on industrialization, immigration, and imperialism. We are now looking specifically more at the progressive era in U.S. history, primarily looking at the years between 1900 and 1920. This is our third unit of the semester. It's our second to last one, excuse me. We'll have one more. This unit will take us probably up through Thanksgiving break, and then we'll finish our last unit when we come back from there. We're also going to be writing an essay in this unit, so fun times, be on the lookout for that, but we're going to work on that. So in this unit, we're going to look at a lot of things. Primarily, we're going to look at a lot of changes that happen socially and culturally in America. We're also going to look at changes from, an economic standpoint, a political standpoint. The progressive era is a big period of change in the United States. And a lot of the changes have really impacted our society even to this day. And that's what we're going to kind of unpack and do and kind of talk about and what you're going to write about in your essay. And that's what we're going to go from here. So today we're just going to talk about like what is, who, what, when, where, and why, what like these things about the progressives, the progressive era. That's what we're going to unpack today. Okay? So let's start off. The progressives. The goal of the progressive era was to gain progress by reforming problems caused by the Industrial Revolution. And some of these problems kind of have to do with like urban kind of dwellings, the plight of the immigrant coming over, the lack of respect for women, the lack of race relations in our country, or racial equality, excuse me, in our country. Among other things, healthcare, there was a lot, education, we're going to talk about a lot of these. So who were the progressives? They wanted to make changes. These were people that were looking to make changes. And they thought that the government should be responsible for the changes. It shouldn't just be on the people. They believed that the government should play a role. Mostly middle class people. Not the rich, because the rich don't want to change anything because that hurts their money, right? That's why, rich people come out a lot of times and support Trump because Trump will keep the taxes down, right? And the middle class had enough social capital compared to where poor people were to make changes and have their voices be heard. Mostly happened in the cities. At this point in our country, we've gone from a place where people were kind of spread out, kind of across the country. Now people are pretty concentrated in cities, and this goes to the majority of people, the majority of schools, the majority of businesses, jobs. Everyone's living in the cities now. There's a lot of women. Women arguably are probably one of the most important demographic groups in the progressive era because they spearheaded a lot of the changes, and women really paved the way for a lot of things, and we should be very grateful. We're actually going to look at a few women, one woman today, and so the changes she made or advocated for, excuse me. And also there's a lot of college educated. This was the first era in the early 1900s where you had a larger population of college educated folks. For a long time, college education was only allowed for the elitist of the elitist, the upper crust echelon of people. Even back then, 120 years ago, it was still very much an upper class thing, but there were more stories of kind of middle class and even sometimes lower class people getting their way, climbing their way through the ranks of education and succeeding and doing really well. And so this was a first time we had a noticeable kind of college educated population. And so, we're looking and talking about like what did they want, right? And obviously they wanted changes, but they wanted like better working conditions. They wanted better health care. They wanted better environmental practices. more equality for women, um, a better educational system. And progressives could believe this could be done, but they needed government help. That's the big thing you got to remember. They needed the government's help. We're going to look at a couple progressive leaders right now, um, but a good terminology that you might see in some of the readings that we look at is the term muckraker. A muckraker is just kind of an older word that was used like for journalists primarily who work to kind of hashtag expose people and expose corruption in a lot of different areas of our country. And so we're going to look at a couple people. You're actually going to study a few of these people for the homework assignment. Um, and yeah, so let's go ahead and crack into it. So let's start off, and I'm just going to cover these people briefly because your homework assignment goes into it in more greater detail. First guy, Lincoln Steffens. He exposed the issues and corruptions of a lot of small city governments. Back in the day, a lot of city governments were kind of controlled by either criminal organizations, or there was just a lot of kind of just political backroom deals that were, getting done, and the idea of like democracy really wasn't being followed. And so a lot of the work that Lincoln Stevens did in his journalism really kind of forces out these corrupt politicians. And now city governments became a lot stronger, a lot more, and had a lot more integrity. Jacob Reeves, he has a pretty famous book called How the Other Half Lives. It's all about kind of the plight of the urban poor, people who lived in kind of tenement housings, which we're going to talk about. But tenement housings is essentially just like these shanty towns, really packed conditions, which at the time city living was like. Things were really packed. People were packed in, people were really poor, people didn't have access to quality healthcare, people didn't have access to a quality education, and just in general, the quality of life for people in cities who were poor was just really bad. Unfortunately, he's like a pretty big racist, so his legacy is stained, but his book is still pretty influential, so it's good that you just know who he is. And again, like I said, women play a huge role in this, so we're going to talk about Ida Tarbell. Her big thing was exposing Standard Oil. You're going to learn about what that is, and helped really kind of get rid of monopolies and trusts in America. A trust is kind of like a monopoly. We'll talk more about that in class and in our discussions. But yeah. Another individual, Upton Sinclair, famous author who helped expose the meat packing industry. You're going to be pretty surprised to hear about kind of what that was like back in the day, the meat packing industry, and be very thankful that we live in 2020. Pretty much improved food safety in America, and a pretty important muckraker journalist. We're also going to look at two presidents, although they're not involved in the homework. I think it's kind of just important that we kind of look at some of these presidents. We already talked about them before. One guy we talk about a lot is Woodrow Wilson. President Wilson pretty much ran on the whole idea of the progressive movement. That's kind of what won him the election when he was running for president. He was really into whole like economic and banking reform, which was a big part of the progressive movement, which we'll talk about. We're also going to talk a lot more about him in World War I, because he's our president during World War I. But before Woodrow Wilson, we had a guy by the name of Theodore Roosevelt. He was kind of a man's man. He was kind of insecure and wanted to always prove he was tough. He was a soldier, traveler, loved the outdoors, really tried to make himself seem like this macho man. He was pretty progressive because he had a lot of his overwhelming support for protecting nature and the creation of the national park system. Without Teddy Roosevelt, we don't probably have a lot of the national parks that we have today. And this includes Yosemite, if you've ever been, quite a beautiful scene. Yeah, you can look up pictures. That would be the Grand Canyon. And this, I don't know, I believe this might be Glacier National Park. I'm not 100% sure. But again, a lot of the pristine beauty of America has been protected by a progressive leader like Theodore Roosevelt. And protecting the environment once was a pretty progressive ideal. and Republicans were really into it too. It's funny how it's changed in like 100 years. Um, but yeah, that's where we're going to stop today. Didn't want to keep this unit isn't going to be particularly long. These videos aren't going to be particularly long. The essay is where you're going to do, I think, a lot of your learning and where I want you to focus your effort at. And that's going to come next week is when we'll start that. But for now, that's all I have for you guys. So stay safe. Let's keep fighting COVID. Hoorah, fight, fight, fight. That's all I got for you guys. All right, y'all. Take care.